Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Take This Week. My name is Aplak. Hope all of you are keeping well today. So today, I'm not going to discuss a particular technology, but instead, I'll try to discuss, if not share my opinion, about a particular thing that I've thought through a lot over the past few weeks. And it's a question which has taken up a lot of my curiosity, which is, the last few decades, there have many technologies come, and they've created huge buzz, but they haven't crossed the adoption pattern. They attracted funding, they got the headlines, research breakthroughs were done, but they still remain commercially distant for years. Probably if you take one example that comes to my mind, again, I'm no tech expert, but I've heard a lot of quantum computing. In fact, metaverse also. So the deeper question that I'm trying to answer for myself and share my thoughts with all of you is why do these patterns, repeat across multiple technological generations? So let's understand probably some of the reasons for that. First, I mean, the way I like to call it, it's like the myth of the early mover advantage, because we are taught to believe, that innovation rewards whoever arrives first with the strongest idea. uh, Adopter advantage. But if you look at the history of technology, and this is where gets interesting, being first is rarely the winning strategy. I'll give you many examples. I'll take you one example. For instance, how many of you have even heard of this company called the Friendster? Few would have, most of you may not even have heard of it because they came much before Facebook, uh, and Friendster had the world's attention, but they arrived before the infrastructure was ready, and the servers would literally melt under the pressure of people wanting to poke each other. And then you have like another example of now when you search, Google literally become a verb, right? But before Google even became a verb, there was this company called Alta Vista. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation correct. They were called the king of search. You take Nokia, BlackBerry. They defined mobile phone for years before iPhone changed the entire world. So this brings us to the hard truth. Being first frequently means you are the one absorbing the uncertainty tax. Think of it. You're taking the big risk. But in reality, pioneers often arrive before customers, infrastructure, and practical use cases exist. That kind of at times works against these companies, or technologies for that matter. Here we're talking about technologies. In fact, a technology can be technically viable. You have to understand, yet economically uncomfortable for early adopters. So, as a technology, it may be successful, but it needs to be applied to make money for others, right? So, businesses adopt innovations when cost, savings, and risks become predictable. So I'll give you an example of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles suggest struggled for many years when batteries have been expensive and charging networks were scarce. But that doesn't mean electric vehicles weren't good for the world. Cloud computing had a lot of resistance before it actually became a more economically viable solution to the existing infrastructure that was available. So economics often determines timing more strongly than technology maturity, right? And this is where it's a little surprising, right? So because also we've seen in the world of technology, many engineers fuss about something that's fancy, and they focus on what is technically impressive instead of focusing on what is the need of the market. So markets adopt solutions when the problem becomes painful enough to demand change. So I'll give you an example of virtual reality. So we had so many tools, headgears, and stuff like that. Virtual reality impressed many developers, and they worked so much tirelessly around it. But everyday computing rarely required this kind of immersive environments, right? Many early smart home technologies also existed before convenience justified this complexity. So I think urgency more than novelty at times drives and determines adoption excellence. So what am I trying to say here? Is should we stop innovating? Of course not. We need to stop looking at breakthroughs as moments of brilliance alone. There have been few instances, and start seeing them as ecosystem events. A revolutionary technology is like a seed that cannot grow until the entire climate around it changes. The smartphone didn't succeed because Steve Jobs was a magician. Think it succeeded because a lot of things came together in one frame. 3G networks, cheap flash memory, and capacitive touchscreens all matured at the same time. You know, so it was not mere coincidence. It worked like that. Take AI for example. AI as a concept has existed for many years. AI is not new, but how come suddenly become everybody's talking about? Because the core idea behind AI being successful is because of three things converging together at the same time: massive data, cheap compute, and practical applications. So this is why the same idea can fail in one decade and dominate in the next. So the idea may not be bad; it's the timing that matters. So the difference is rarely the invention itself. So here's why analysts take that kind of ties my introduction to quantum computing. Because you must have be wondering why did I pick up on quantum computing? When we say technology hasn't taken off, we usually assume progress is stalled, right? This is not the case here. There are a lot of work which is already still exists in quantum. And you have to understand quantum computing may be advancing faster than we realize inside research lab. The question is whether the rest of the world has caught up to use it. So most companies do not yet have a problem that clearly demand quantum solutions. It's not the talent, tooling, or the workforce to integrate them. So until those surroundings pieces mature, the technology remains visible mostly through research announcements rather than everyday applications. Which means a real bottleneck may not be quantum progress itself. It may be a readiness to absorb it. But even after saying all this, I'll myself take a complete U-turn. So innovation remains incredibly unpredictable, and I'll give you a great example for this, and one of my all-time favorites. Sony, did not. I'm sure many of you would have heard of the product called Walkman. I was a proud owner of one, right? So Sony did not invent the Walkman because customer demanded portable music. It was built on the belief that people might want something that they had never imagined, right? Did it have a market? Did it have an ecosystem? Was it tested? Was it before ahead of its time? It was, but it succeeded. I'll give you one more example. The film industry. The film industry. There's so many filmmakers. Directors, producers, actors, actresses, technicians, pundits. They understand the business of cinema, but there's none of them still can guarantee the success of a movie, right? They keep on and I'll tie this story to a technology. CDance 2.0 has been on news for so much of a screen time, right? It through AI, uh, it got Hollywood and rest of the cinema world scared because what it's putting out there is so lifelike, so real as how a film production house does it. Yet, and this is where the big yet comes in. Even with that capability, nobody can guarantee that audiences will embrace even what CDANS 2.0 creates, right? So this is where innovation keeps us on our toes, keeps us going. Because at the end of the day, you can engineer the invention, you can never engineer the moment. Think on this. I think it's a great area to think through. Have a great week ahead.